Hey guys, it's Standing for Truth coming to you. I am live here with a couple guests. We got a really exciting debate ahead of us today. I'd like to thank Dr. Kent Hovind, and Snake was right, is who he goes by on his YouTube channel. Thanks so much for giving us your time for this really exciting debate. So let's get right into it, shall we? I've gotten a film free here who's going to be co-moderating with me, so I want to thank him for that. This debate, it's going to be fast-paced and engaging. I'll have Neff here start it off by reading the format for the debate, and we'll get right into it.
Okay, so the debate format is as follows: 2 5-minute openings. There'll be 2 periods of 4 minutes for rebuttal each, 4 minutes apiece twice, a 20-minute discussion period, and 2 3-minute closings. Then we'll have an 8-minute question and answer section. So with that, I guess we're ready to begin. Dr. Hovind or Snake was right. Which one is going first?
Oh, he can go first. No problem.
Okay. Taylor, I'll start the clock for your 5-minute opening when you begin speaking.
Okay, I'm just setting something up real quick and we will begin. I want to share my screen too, if that's all right. Can I do that now?
You should be able to from the link on the side, the left there.
There we go.
Yep.
I'll be right back. My mouse just died.
Oh.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, now we do.
Okay. So what we're going to be focusing on today is the debate topic is evolution scientific? So we're going to have to define what scientific is and what evolution is. So what we're talking about is biological evolution, which is defined as descent with modifications, or also defined more narrowly as the change in genetic composition of a population from generation to generation. That's from my personal textbook. Oxford Dictionaries also says it's the process by which different kinds of living organisms are thought to have developed and diversified from earlier forms during the history of the Earth. So what we're talking about is the change of existing life forms. We are not talking about abiogenesis or how life began, only how existing life changes. What is not biological evolution? As I've explained, how life began, abiogenesis; chemical evolution, how simpler molecules became more complex outside of this process of reproducing life forms; cosmic evolution, how the celestial bodies formed due to gravity in the Big Bang; evolution of cars, evolution of arms and armor, any other type of evolution that is not referring to the change of living things. I sincerely hope my opponent does not try that straw man. So microevolution, my opponent already agrees with, which is a change in allele frequency in a population due to recombination and mutation. What he does not agree with is that exact same process at an above species level. So that process applied to a change between species. Let's see. So there are 3 possibilities here with creationism. Either 99.998% of life scientists are desperately ignorant about the topic of our own study, and amateur scientists, like biblical literalists, know more about science than the actual scientists do. That's possibility number 1. Possibility number 2 is that 99.998% of scientists, including a majority of Christians, are all acting under the religion of scientism and working for some sort of vague atheist conspiracy. The third option is that the amateurs are demonstrating the Dunning-Kruger effect, where they are unable to sense or acknowledge their own incompetence. And this is not some sort of attack on anyone. I'm an amateur in many subjects. But the young Earth creationist narrative necessarily relies on a conspiracy theory because they will not admit possibility number 1 or possibility number 2. So we're going to go over the formal logic of evolution, and we'll see if Kent agrees with this at all. Premise 1, we observe divergent population change due to change of allele frequency and inherited modifications. Premise 2, that's evolution. Premise 3, we observe changes between populations in the fossil layers. Premise 4, populations in the layer trend toward modern life and more diversity as you go up towards the younger layers. Premise 5, evolution and phylogeny predict new fossils and where to find new and old ones. Conclusion, evolution is responsible for the changes in populations between fossil layers. So a possible conversation topic we could have is Kent could point out where in those premises or conclusion he disagrees with.
Taylor, you have 1 minute 43 seconds.
1 whole minute? Okay, so we're just going to go over the methodology of science versus religion. Science observes and gathers evidence, produces a hypothesis or a theory, which produces a prediction, and that prediction is tested, and we go with those observations and we either retest it or go to other questions. Now, this is the methodology of science, and evolution fits this methodology. The methodology of religion is to just assume your religious book is true and then try to make all of the evidence fit that. Creationism already acknowledges that evolution is true and scientific. What we're going to disagree on is whether or not that constitutes common ancestry in the fossil record. To say that a non-cow came from a cow or that a cow came from a non-cow is a straw man of evolution. But I'm sure this will come up. Evolution is true because it's scientific because we observe it, because our theories make testable predictions in virology and geology. And since we've never seen a special creation, there's no reason to assume it. And certain unique genes are conserved among lineages when they develop. And this is how we tell paternity and ancestry within species. And the changes of the exact same type of mutation occurring is low. What happens is called convergent evolution. The changes of the exact same mutation in the exact same gene is about 1 in 113 billion. So the chances to say that evolution is more likely than creationism is indeed scientific by all definitions. And that's where I rest my case.
Okay, I'll reset the timer. 5 minutes. Dr. Hovind, whenever you begin speaking, I'll begin the timer.
All right, Taylor, can you put your slides back up? Number 10. Let's start there. I'd be glad to address all of these things. I can see why you believe in evolution. I don't think you understand what creation teaches. So, no, I'm sorry, keep going. Number 11, 12, I think it's 11. Oh, you didn't use those, did you?
Which one are you looking for? The logic one or the methodology?
Sure, that's fine. All right.
I have this variant too, and it might be a little bit more agree to you.
I'll back up 2 more before the conspiracy one. That'll be slide number 5. Back up 2. Okay. You said there are 3 possibilities here. Oh, back up right there. This is where you're mistaken. That's like saying are elephants orange or are elephants pink? There are more options than that, okay? You've given 3 possibilities, all of which are obviously wrong. That's not how you do science. You don't limit it to 3 and then pick which of the 3 you want. There's a 4th possibility you haven't even considered here. There's probably more than 4 possibilities. If it's going to be logic, I mean, you're going to use logic. You got to say, hold it. Why are we limiting it to 3? I think some of you evolutionists have limited it down to say, okay, we know life evolved. Now we just have to figure out how. Well, you need to back up and always be willing to re-examine your premise. We don't know that life evolved. I always, in my seminar, show the 6 different meanings of the word evolution, which you had up here, and you only want to talk about number 5 and 6. Are the changes that we see within are variations within what I would call the same kind, and you use the word species, it never varies beyond that. So I would say all 3 of your possibilities listed here are not part of the question. It's not part of the answer either. The 4th possibility is that God created the animals and plants to bring forth after their kind, and he gave them an incredible gene code that is able to vary for many different ways and many different reasons, but it stays within the same kind. I use the example all the time of dogs. There are quite a few varieties of dogs in the world. The American Kennel Association recognizes 339 breeds of dogs. They might have had a common ancestor called a dog. That is exactly what the Bible says is going to happen. And yet you are saying that dogs are related to bananas if you go back far enough in time. And I suspect that you would say, no, we know dogs will always produce dogs. I don't understand how you evolutionists cannot see the obvious in front of you. You will say going forward in the future, dogs always produce dogs. But in the past, something non-dog had to produce a dog. If you believe dogs and bananas have a common ancestor, which I'm sure you do, was that common ancestor a dog or a banana? Which one was it? And did it turn into something other than its kind? And how could evolution happen in the past? We don't see it in the present. We don't see dogs produce anything but dogs. I would like to point out also, Taylor, I'm sure you've heard me say this, that no fossils at all, no fossils are going to count for evidence for evolution. When you find fossils in the dirt, all you really can prove is it died. You cannot prove that fossil had any children that lived. You certainly couldn't prove it had children that lived that were different. And instead of looking for fossils for your evidence, why don't you watch what the farmers are doing today? There's a whole lot of animals having babies all over the world, and they always produce the same kind. Cows produce cows, dogs produce dogs. There is no evidence of any change beyond what I would call the same kind. There's no evidence of this happening any place on planet Earth in recorded history. So you have incredible faith to believe it happened in the past, long ago and far away, but that's not science. What we see today are roughly 8,000 different kinds of animals on land, depending on how you want to count them. There's a website called baraminology.com that deals with baramin, which is the Hebrew word for kind, and they're trying to calculate how many kinds of animals are there in the world. And the guess is on land about 8,000. In the
50
water,
seconds.
In the water, thousands more. But the Bible says they will bring forth after their kind. So without referring to fossils or something in the past that certainly wouldn't hold up as evidence for evolution at all, like the walking lungfish or whatever, maybe it was designed to be that way. You don't know that that's a transition between anything. When it has babies, they turn out just like their mom and dad. And when they have grandbabies, they turn out like mom and dad. So you somehow believe that this came from something that was non-walking lungfish, and this is simply not science. I wish you could see it, Taylor. What you have is a religion. You believe strongly that in the past, animals were able to do something no animal today can do, produce something other than their kind. The Bible said 20 times in the first 7 chapters, they'll bring forth after their kind. That's all we've ever seen. So I rest my case.
Okay, Taylor, you have 4 minutes, and then we'll do this twice each. So I'm setting the clock at 4 minutes. Taylor, I'll begin when you start speaking.
I think, Taylor, I think you're muted. I muted you for Dr. Hovind's presentation. You just got to unmute yourself.
Oh. Okay. Is my screen up?
Yes.
Okay. So we don't just draw lines on a piece of paper and say it happened. The reason we know it happened is because we have models that make accurate predictions about when and where the fossils are going to be. And since we predict transitional fossils being transitions between 2 different solid species groups, and then we go find it exactly where we expected it to be, that confirms our model. So let's talk about kinds. Is this a cat or a dog kind? No creationist has ever been able to answer, and to me this proves that links between kinds exist because traits can be mixed such that you can't tell and that they lead into one another. This is still evolution. My opponent has already admitted that my thesis in this debate. Microevolution is evolution. I'm going to humor him with macroevolution though, because that's pretty much the crux of our misunderstanding here. He says that we've never observed any kind of species transforming into a different kind. And by his definition of kind, we have witnessed this. It's called a ring species. Each species in this line is able to reproduce with the one next to it, but the earliest and the latest form are not able to reproduce. They're not able to bring forth. They are not the same kind. So that's like saying A equals B equals C, but C does not equal A. That is mathematically, logically incoherent. And yes, this has been proven. we see speciation. We see speciation in real time with algae, and we see them go from single cellular to colonial or to multicellular with different tissues and different cell functions. So why would God make each of these species individually and specially, a special creation for each single one of these steps? Even though they have each been able to be proven to evolve into each other, why would God make organisms that fill every step of what evolution would predict and then expect us to reject evolution? If life was created 6,000 years ago, the creator certainly wanted us to think life was evolved. We observe this happening in real time, both in the wild and the laboratory. We've seen single cells go to multicellular organisms, and not just colonies, but colonies that have evolved the exact same cell number, and they retain that cell number. And then from there, we've seen them actually differentiate into sexual cells versus somatic cells in the laboratory. And we proved that the gene that is doing this was present in the unicellular starting organisms. And we observed them evolve in the lab multiple times with multiple different selection pressures. And we saw this happen. Now, this is called confirming your model, and this is something creationism cannot do as an alternative, and I'm using creationism as an example of what bad science looks like to compare it to what good science looks like. So Darwin predicted that we would have
30 seconds.
Darwin predicted that we would find a transition between dinosaurs and birds. We found that within 2 years, exactly where we'd expect it to find it. That's called confirming the model. Now, all of these creatures that I'm showing you right now are all the same kind of creature. Where do you think that they're not the same kind of creature anymore? The only difference is the little fin fibrils became a little thicker, and they look like fingers now.
That's time. Okay, resetting the clock. Dr. Hovind, you have 4 minutes, sir, when you begin speaking.
Well, thank you, Taylor. Excellent slides, excellent work. You're going to make a great creationist when we get you converted. Could we use your slide number 29 again? And let me point out what I think would be obvious. Slide number 29. I did not prepare slides for this. I was told I couldn't use them. So, okay. Taylor, I want you to look carefully at what you have here. Well, you're calling it a ring species. I'm very familiar with that. I lived in California for a couple of years. What you have are lizards that when you get around the central part of California, you end up with a lizard. Every 4-year-old on planet Earth would recognize both of them as the same kind. This is where you're mixing the word kind and the word species. God said they will bring forth after their kind, and I think every 4-year-old on up in the entire planet would look at those and say, those are the same kind of animal. It's a lizard. If that is somehow evidence that lizards are related to bananas, you need to get your money back for your education. They lied to you. That is not evidence. That is evidence that animals can produce a variety, and they may no longer be interfertile for whatever reason. Like the rabbits from Alaska cannot breed with the rabbits from Florida, is my understanding. Their cycles are different because of the weather. However, the Minnesota rabbits would breed with either one. They're halfway between. And so you now have 2 separate species of rabbit, but they're the same kind of animal called a rabbit. So I think all you've demonstrated here is creation. Now, if you could go to slide 41, okay, I'd leave that right there. Logically incoherent. I never said A equals B and B equals C, but A does not equal C. I taught math for 15 years. I'll be glad to take a quiz against you or anybody else on algebra, geometry, or trig if you'd like, and it's been 40 years since I did it. But I believe the evidence clearly shows that animals always produce after their kind. So look at slide 41, if you would, on yours. You showed a variety of creatures that I think you'd like to maybe look at the actual fossils that are found. Did they find all of the bones for any of these creatures? You have several of them listed here. Are the complete skeletons found? Are they different enough that they cannot be the same kind? Do you know that any of those fossils that were found had children? How could you prove they had children? Again, you're looking in the wrong place for evidence. You're looking for fossils. As far as predictive power, I completely disagree. All of the layers of the earth were formed in one big flood. Of course, animals are going to be sorted based upon their body density, based upon their habitat, based upon their mobility. You can get a jar of dirt, sand, rocks, and gravel and water and shake it up and produce 20 layers in 20 seconds. And you need to watch my video number 6 about the flood in the days of Noah. The flood would have formed all the layers in a matter of a few weeks or months. I cover on my video series about how Grand Canyon had to form probably in a couple weeks, certainly not millions of years, and the stratification happens rapidly. As the moon pulls the tides up, it's going to suck all the water in from the sides. Here in Lenox, Alabama, we're spinning around the earth at 886 miles an hour. That would mean the water would move sideways for 886 miles an hour for maybe an hour or two. Then it would slow down and stabilize during high tide. And then when the water goes back down, the water rushes the other way, 886 miles an hour. So I think you're simply dreaming. You're using evidence of transitional fossils. Stop. First place, you don't know that they're transition between anything. Is a tricycle a transition between a bicycle and a car? It has 3 wheels. Well, if you want to believe it is a transition, you can. But no, each one is designed to do what it does. I think a freshman law student in a court of law could look at any one of these you're presenting and say, Your Honor, A, you don't know that they had any children. B, you certainly don't know they had different children. C, no animal alive today, no animal is able to produce other than its kind. Why would you think a bone in the dirt could do it? It's insane. It's great faith you have, though. I do admire your faith. Go ahead.
4 minutes for Taylor.
So we know they had children because we find many of them, and we find them at different ages, and we find their eggs. The individuals are always part of populations. We also know that the flood did not sort them by density or size or ability to escape, because there are many organisms that died that are able to escape, such as pterosaurs that can fly, and they eat fish, so they would not have been affected at all by the flood, yet they're all dead. And the first layers of the floods show a single cellular life for half of that period. So how are the lightest, smallest organisms ending up at the bottom? Your sorting method makes no coherent sense whatsoever. Let's see. You said I'm just interpreting bones I found in the dirt as being ancestors, and that we don't know that these ever changed over time. And we know this because of the model, which is making accurate predictions. The ancestor model predicts that animals change. The chemistry predicts the date range and the type of change. The geology can predict the correct region and environment. And then we find either typical fossils or a transitional fossil. And we can find transitional fossils that we've never found based purely on our model. We can say, I think there's going to be a transitional fossil between this, and I'm going to say it's going to have these traits. And it's going to exist at this date range. And we go out and we find them. That's because we know what we're talking about. That's because the model is accurate, and there's no arguing that whatsoever. That proves the ancestor model. We don't just look at evidence and make up a story. We gather evidence, test possible explanations, and we stick with those explanations that make novel, future testable predictions. As for the definition of, as for ring species, when A equals B equals C, I was using equals to mean brings forth. So A can bring forth with B, B can bring forth with C, C can bring forth with D, and D can bring forth with E. That means that they're all the same kind, according to Hovind's definition. But his definition is broken because we can see that E cannot bring forth with A. Therefore, that's why scientists don't use that terminology. They don't use bring forth as any way to distinguish organisms. Species applies more broadly, talking about ability to breed not only on the genetic level, but the physical level and the geographic level and the behavioral preference level. So the fact that these salamanders diverge from one another and can no longer bring forth means that we have witnessed within the same kind, what Mr. Hovind literally just admitted was this all the same kind. We've witnessed speciation, and two of these members of the same kind no longer being the same kind. That is speciation. I have proven my thesis here. How much time do I have left?
You have 50 seconds.
All right. We do have the fossils for these. And this is going to be the same argument. They're all the same kind. They're just diversification within the same kind. So what we see between the fossil layers is we know that they're all millions of years apart due to chemistry, and you have to overturn the chemical consensus to refute that. And we see populations change in real life. We see populations change in the fossil layers. It's no stretch. And we see fish using their fins to walk. And it's pretty simple stuff.
That's time.
That'll be my time.
Okay, Dr. Hovind, you have 4 minutes, sir.
All right. If we can call my background up on screen, full screen here instead of his, can you change that? There. I was told, Taylor, that your specialty is in cells, becoming, I understand, a PhD student in cell biology. Am I right on that?
It's just an undergrad degree. It's not PhD. But
Okay.
yeah, it's in cell biology, developmental biology.
Cell developmental biology. I guess I'm curious. You can answer this later. Put my screen back up here if you would, guys. Why you are focusing so much on fossils as opposed to your specialty, which is supposed to be cells. The cell is incredibly complex, mind-bogglingly complex. Darwin thought of the cell as just simply a sack of jelly. He didn't know any better. Nobody did back in the 1850s. They thought they didn't have good enough microscopes to see the unbelievable complexity. But now if you look through a microscope, especially a good microscope, at the cell and the DNA and the replication and the RNA and the process, even the cell membrane, the way it has, lets things in and out. And if you look at unicellular organisms that have a motor that's able to turn 100,000 RPM to spin the flagella, the little paramecium swim through their world with their little propeller, the equivalent of a human swimming 60 miles an hour through peanut butter. It's a mind-boggling, the complexity of little tiny bacterial flagellum motors, that you could fit 8 million of them on the stump of a hair. I'm baffled how anyone can go through college and come out believing something that complex happened by chance. I don't understand. So I was hoping you would stick with what your specialty is, which hopes to be, I guess, on cell biology. Why would you go to fossils? It doesn't matter. I point out, again, if this was a court of law, I would say, Your Honor, you cannot prove those had any children. You certainly can't prove they had different children, and no animals today produce different children. And the salamanders you showed are still salamanders. What you've shown is probably the variation, the limits of the kind, like the Alaska rabbits and the Florida rabbits. That might be the limit for heat tolerance or whatever's doing that. Dogs, if you turned all the dogs in the world loose into Alaska, come back 5 years and see what happened. All the short-haired dogs would probably be dead and not produce any offspring, and all the long-haired dogs with thicker fur, shorter legs, denser body would survive, and all the dogs would look something like the wolf or the dogs that are common to Alaska today, because the climate, natural selection works great, but it only selects. You have somehow imagined that it has creative power. There's no creative power in a selection process. If I went through the state of Alabama and selected everybody over 7 feet tall to survive and killed everybody under 7 feet tall, within a few generations, I would have a whole population of 7-footers. Would that process ever make a whole population of 20-foot tall people? No, it's not in the gene code. The gene code is limited probably to humans, maybe pygmies, 4 foot tall, to some people 7 or 8 feet tall. But there's a limit to human size. Why don't we find humans as big as an elephant? There are animals as big as an elephant, like an elephant. Why don't we find humans getting as small as a hamster? Because there are mammals as small as a hamster, like a hamster. I've never gotten an evolutionist to admit it, and I doubt you will either. But are there limits to the gene code? Does it vary? Is it limited by anything? Are there physical limits, like opposition to gravity, for instance? Are there any limits at all? Why don't they ever they've been breeding dogs for a long time trying to get varieties, and they get some bizarre varieties from Chihuahua to Great Dane, but they always get a dog. It's recognizable as a dog. As far as the Tasmanian animal you showed a while ago, I don't know how that's been classified, if it's a dog or a cat. I think it's a Tasmanian wolf, I think is what you showed, if I recall.
That's time.
Extinct. But But still, the classification of animals is something man is doing today to the animals. I don't know what the original kinds that God made were. I'll ask him when I get to heaven. I'd like to see you there too, by the way. Did you say time is up?
Yes, sir. All right,
Okay.
so we'll have a 20-minute discussion period. No slides for this, just the two of you back and forth discussing the subject. And I'll start my timer let's see, let me set the timer for 20 minutes. I gotta move it on up. Okay, I'll start the timer now.
So I'm focusing on fossils because that's what originally confirmed the model, and that's what came before genetics and molecular cellular studies. So that's where I start to confirm the model, and that should be proof enough. We can talk about cellular stuff, especially mutations. I really like that.
Sure. Now, you say fossils confirmed the model, and you use the word we probably 500 times already in the discussion so far. We meaning you are part of this community that is doing this? Are you actually going out looking for fossils? Are you confirming the model? Because I hear you use the word we all the time. What do you mean by that? How do you include yourself in this group?
People who accept the scientific consensus.
So you claim...
Or scientists in general.
So you claim the scientific consensus is that evolution is true. Was the scientific consensus before Darwin's day quite the opposite? Was it the consensus that there was a God who created things? Was that did Darwin go against the consensus of his day?
As far as I know, it wasn't a scientific consensus. It would have been a religious consensus, but there is really no consensus among religions. They can't even agree on their own holy book.
Well, I've got the right holy book. That's no question.
That's what they all say.
And you're convinced you've got the right scientific theory, and I don't think scientists even agree on that. And your numbers, 99.998%, are way off. Surveys show it's closer to like 60% of scientists believe in evolution without a God involved. I don't know where you got these numbers to impress people. But
I'm talking about life sciences, not just like strictly biology sciences.
Yeah, but again, surveys wouldn't prove anything. I think you could find if you took a survey in North Korea, everybody thinks Kim Jong-un or whatever his name is a wonderful guy. There'd be, and I think if you Taylor went to your teacher and said, "Teacher, I don't believe evolution's true. It doesn't work," I bet they would flunk you out of the class and stop you from graduating. So of course that's going to be the consensus in modern science in America, because it's no different than North Korea where you have to believe in communism.
If I wrote that on my test, I would flunk out. But if I was just asking the teacher questions, they would answer them. And so this is why I say that you rely on a conspiracy, because, of course, North Korea is able to fudge its results because they have a government conspiracy oppressing all its people. So is there something oppressing scientists in the sciences?
Have you seen the movie Expelled by Ben Stein?
Yes. Several years ago, probably when it came out.
Yeah, I think you should watch that again and call some of the scientists who have been repressed because they don't support the party line of evolution.
I mean, I was in high school at the time, and it was pretty obvious to me what was going on.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, watch it one more time for me, please. Expelled by Ben Stein. It's excellent. There certainly is a consensus against teaching creation. There's obviously only two options. There is a creator or there isn't. If there's a creator, that would probably involve some responsibility on our part. Like, who is he? What does he want? Do we have to obey some rules? If evolution is true, like you claim, would you please tell the audience how you decide right from wrong? Is murder right or wrong? Is sex with your dog right or wrong? Is anything right or wrong? But before you start making a list of what's right and wrong, I would like to know how, based on your model, you decide right from wrong. How do you decide what's right, what's wrong, on any topic? Where's your standard?
It's not based on evolution. It's based on the exact same thing your God would use to decide right from wrong, which is logic. So
you're borrowing Christian values to decide right from wrong?
No, logic is not a Christian value. But your God would certainly be capable of perfect logic and perfect rationality. And I believe that if your God existed, which is not incompatible with evolution at all, that he would have perfect rationality, and that his rules for morality would be based on this perfect rationality.
Okay. Most states have laws against incest, fathers having sex with their daughters. if a father has an 8-year-old daughter who consents, would that be wrong? Should that father be arrested? Would you consider that wrong? Even though the state laws do say it's wrong, under your model, should it be wrong? I guess is what I'm asking. How do you decide? How do you decide if something should be wrong? Is it wrong for you to murder your neighbor and take away his stuff? If so,
Yes.
why? Why would it be wrong?
Yes, because a child cannot consent in the first place to sex. And basically, we can get into the nitty gritty, but this has nothing to do with evolution. So I'll sum it up for you. Good is essentially just freedom. So when you reduce someone else's freedom, you're doing bad.
So if the lion goes and eats the baby zebra, the lion thinks it's fine. The baby zebra doesn't appreciate it, nor does the mother zebra at all. Is that wrong? Or is that just nature? Or what's the difference between humans going to, take your neighbor's stuff, kill your neighbor, take over his house, and you got a bunch of free stuff? The lion did that with the zebra. Is there something different between humans and animals? Why do we have these rules like don't steal from your neighbor?
Yeah, because a lion is not a moral agent. It doesn't understand anything it's doing.
So are humans...
Sure, killing another animal, sure, you can call that evil. You can call that unfortunate, whatever. But it's just doing what it does. You can't hold it responsible. You might... We kill animals that harm people or too many other animals that are out of control. That's somewhat justice, if you can look at it like that. But we don't hold them to the same standards because they're not capable of rational thought.
So is there something different between humans and animals? Does man have something no other animal has? A sense of right and wrong, a conscience, a soul, a spirit, whatever it is. Is there any difference between humans and animals? In our biology, I would think we probably would all agree. We both ingest food, digest it, get rid of waste, use energy. But is there anything spiritually or morally different from man and animals?
Well, we have a few gene deletions which cause expansions in brain activity. And so a more complex brain is able to handle more complex social situations. And so we see basic morality existing in monkeys and apes, but we just have a more complex social ability.
So we are simply more complex socially than monkeys and apes. When you die, what's going to happen to you, Taylor? Is there any part of you that's going to live on besides your offspring, if you have any? If you don't have any, doesn't matter. Is there any part of Taylor that's going to live beyond your death?
I imagine the same thing would happen, a similar thing to brain damage. So if I lose part of my memory from brain damage, if my entire brain is damaged, then I'm going to lose all of me.
So there's nothing more to life than eat, drink, and be merry, I guess. Can I summarize it that way for you?
If that's what you want, but we can figure out more things to do.
Okay.
Such as study life.
I love studying life. I've been a child in God's family for 50 years now. I was 16 when I gave my heart to the Lord, and my dad and mom both dad and brother both engineers. My mom and other brother both teachers. I love teaching. I love learning. I want to know the truth. I want to know the truth. The truth to me seems to indicate there had to be a designer for this. This is simply too complex.
Gentlemen, we have 10 minutes. You have a little more than 11 minutes left. I was encouraged to ask you to get the subject back to evolution, if you would. That's the subject of the debate. So
Okay.
morality might be another day. Excellent subject indeed. So let's try to keep it on evolution if we can, please.
Well, okay, that's what I'm just always curious. How does an evolutionist get his morality? Where does he get it from without borrowing it from Christian morals, But you're right, another topic. So what is the best evidence, Taylor, you would say that you have, what is the best evidence anybody can find to support this theory that humans and, say, pine trees are related? You do believe humans and pine trees are related, I'm sure, both eukaryotes or whatever. So what is the best evidence that any animal, besides your salamanders, which are still salamanders, is there anything better than that to show that you can change beyond the same kind?
The fact that this model is used to predict where and when fossils will occur, including fossils that we've never found before. And according to your definition, they're not the same kind of salamander anymore. So that's speciation.
Well, I agree speciation happens. That's our modern classification system, kingdom, phylum, class, order, genus, family, species, all that. So I agree that happens. But that's not, they're still the same kind. Go look at your own picture. They're both a salamander.
But not by your definition, because A and E cannot bring forth anymore.
True. They may have gotten to the point. Originally, though, they could bring forth. So is that variation within the salamanders you saw going around California, is that enough evidence to convince you that salamanders and pine trees have a common ancestor?
No, but we see changes in life in real time in the wild, and then we see changes occurring in the fossil record. And when we date those fossil records to different dates, and then we have a hypothesis. This model assumes that all these are related, and then we go and test that model to see if that assumption is accurate or not. That assumption was accurate because we were able to find almost everything we predicted.
There you go, using the we again. Can you give me a specific example of a fossil that was found in the right place that is considered a transition between different kinds of animals? What's been found?
Archaeopteryx was the first.
And are you aware of the controversy over Archaeopteryx? Was it just a bird?
It has both bird and dinosauric features.
Decided by who? Who decided it has these different features?
It has the same basic bone structure as a bird wing, except unfused finger bones. And it has feathers. And it looks like a bird.
And is there a possibility it was a bird? It had wings, it had feathers, it had hollow bones. Could it have been an unusual bird with teeth? There's a Panamanian hummingbird that has teeth in its mouth. Could it be it's just a bird with teeth and that's now gone extinct? How would you know Archaeopteryx was able to produce anything other than a baby Archaeopteryx?
Because it's more similar to dinosaurs in its skull structure and its overall body plan.
Well, the fact that it has dinosaur-like structures, that's like saying my car has motorcycle-like structures. It has a brake system, just like my motorcycle. Oh, therefore they're related. No, that's a good design feature. You want something to stop the vehicle. Brakes on a motorcycle, brakes on a bicycle, brakes on a car, on a train, on a jet. So the fact that it has similar features, you are interpreting to be evidence of a relationship. I would interpret it to be evidence of a common designer for a common need. They both needed these features to live their life. We have two eyes, so we get binocular vision. So
that's an argument. That's an argument from personal incredulity because because it's just a guess and saying, well, it seems more likely to me. But we've actually tested our model. We found Archaeopteryx because we assumed that it would be a transition. It was found because of the model, meaning the model is accurate.
Well, I think you need to study some more on the actual Archaeopteryx and find out about them. I think many people have come to say that's nothing but just a bird with unusual features. There's also some evidence of some forgery with some of the fossils with Archaeopteryx, gluing the tail on, etc., with the different matrix behind it, the limestone matrix it was glued in being different. There's also evidence of a phenomena called where when you pack something between two layers of rock, as it decays, it'll be a capillary action, pulling little filaments out that look like hairs or feathers, when it's actually just capillary action common between two tightly pressed layers of anything. You can put a drop of water on a piece of paper, put another piece of paper on top real tight, and there'll be capillary action, draw it out into little lines around it. So there are those who take that position, that the feathers, that they say they're feathers on dinosaurs, are actually just simple capillary action as the fossil forms, or as the fossil decays, as the creature decays. But again, you're putting an awful lot of weight on fossils that are dead, that you can't prove had any children. You're claiming evolution happened in the past. Where's it happening today? What animal today is changing into something else? Or is it just coincidence that we've arrived? It doesn't go any further now. Where's evidence today happening?
Well, we've found fossils nesting with eggs, so we've confirmed that they've reproduced that way. Evolution today occurs, we've done it in the lab with algae, and we see it occurring speciation in ring species. So I want to know how the creationist model is scientific, because the evolutionary model follows the scientific method of the observations. We notice that things change over time. Small steps we've only confirmed. And then we have this hypothesis that these small steps add up. We tested that hypothesis. We were able to find specific evidence. We found a bird, half dinosaur in the date range that was predicted with the features that were predicted. So that confirms the model. And then we can repeat that experiment over and over and over and get more and more accurate results. So that is scientific. Whether evolution is true or not, that's following the scientific method.
Sure. The scientific method, if I understand it, and I taught science in high school 15 years, is you have observation, testing, experimentation. So let's do some experimentation. Crossbreed pick any animal you want. Pick your salamanders. You use all the laboratory experiments you want on these salamanders. Could you produce a salamander with wings, do you think? Could you produce a salamander, anything other than a salamander? Could you change it into a recognizably different kind? Could you do that in the lab?
We've seen fish with wings. We've seen octopi with wings. We've
a salamander. You've seen octopi with wings?
Mm-hmm. It's called a blanket octopus.
And so how would you change your salamander into anything non-salamander, or has it just happened to reach the limit while we are alive today in the 21st century?
The same way as we breed features and through mutations. We can go over lots of different mutations that have created fairly large steps toward evolution, and we've already gone over seeing multicellular life evolve from single cellular life.
Well, I would disagree with that multicellular. Let's get back to that in a minute. But okay, would you agree a whole lot of money has been spent, especially in America, but in other countries too, trying to get faster and faster horses to win races? Kentucky Derby, for example. Mm-hmm. Would it be possible to ever breed wings on a horse? Do you think that could ever be done? They'd certainly win the Kentucky Derby if they had wings that could fly. There are some big animals that could fly, you know. So
you're not going to get it in 50 or 60 years.
You think they could get it in 10 million years? Get a horse with wings?
Why not?
Was that a yes? I couldn't hear what he said.
Why not? What's the limit there? We know of things that can fly with their front limbs and can walk on hind limbs, and horses have both of those.
So do you think a horse could...
They might be limited by their bone density. I have no idea.
Well, so far they've been able to get horses slightly faster, but they get problems when they, just like with any farm type animals is the best, because that's where all the selective breeding is done today, most of it. They get cows that give more milk, cows that give more beef. Okay.
And they look totally different from their wild counterparts.
Well, no, in the wild, it never happens. In nature, in laboratory, you can maybe make it go a little further. Take the cow as an example. There are cows that give more milk. I saw one that gives 100 pounds of milk every day. Illinois that year had the record holder for the cow that gives the most milk. It was in Kankakee, Illinois, at a farm. So I took my students to see it.
Those are the features we're selecting for, though, so we're not going to see other changes. We're throwing out the changes we don't want.
I agree. I think you're finally starting to see it. It's man doing this, and he always runs into a stone wall. You can't get too far. There's a limit to the changes, and it's still recognizable as the same kind, and it's less strong as the wild counterpart. Left in the wild, most of the modern cows would all die. They couldn't hold up.
The limit to the changes is if you can survive. So there's a lot of variance in every population, and populations will move towards one direction in that variance. And repeated over millions of years, that you're going to get a new population that has different features.
That's what you believe. I'd like to see, where's this observable? Science is something we can observe. Where is a new population that has been observed to come in recorded human history? They've been watching cows or pigs or sheep for a long time. Is there anything besides the fossils, which again, you couldn't prove had any children that lived? Certainly you couldn't prove they had. Why could the fossil have children that were different when no animal today can have children that are different? Why can the bones do it and the ones today can't do it? What happened?
They can. There's an astounding diversity in all the children of every population. And we observe the formation of new traits in the same population. So that's what we're saying. You're not going to get a non-cow from a cow. You're going to get a cow with a new trait, whether it's just something that's bigger in their body or shorter, or whether it's a new mutation. But we've observed both happening in the wild and in the lab.
So do you believe that a cow came from something like a bacteria or an amoeba, a single-celled creature, 600 million years ago? And did that single-celled creature, that amoeba or whatever one you want to use, did it turn into a cow? And so it certainly gained a whole lot of new traits that amoeba don't have. I don't think amoeba have udders or horns or bones. So how did it get these new traits to go from an amoeba to a cow? And where's the evidence of that?
Well, amoebas have most of the same genetic material. So an udder, there's not just a gene for an udder. It tells the cells to grow in a certain way and then differentiate in a certain way. And a gene from any amoeba could probably do that. It's just a regulatory gene.
So the amoeba could turn into a cow over 600 million years on its own in the wild, even though amoeba are still having babies today, and they're called amoeba.
More like a couple billion years.
Okay, we'll give you 200 trillion years. Why don't we see it happen in the laboratory? Amoeba produce amoeba. No exceptions.
We see these small steps.
Yeah, I know you have a SpongeBob imagination. You imagine that amoeba can turn into a cow. It's just not that simple, Taylor.
We imagine it, we put it to the test, it makes predictions, and then we observe the steps in the lab. And just because there are gaps in the steps, you're inserting your God of the gaps, and that's not science.
No. Put it to the test. I'll give you all the time you want to change an amoeba into anything non-amoeba. How long have they been doing research in the laboratory trying to cause mutations in different, and of course single-celled organisms sometimes have a 20-minute generation time. That's the ideal place to test it, because you could condense the equivalent of tens of thousands of years into one human lifespan.
That's not how evolution works. So when we've observed multicellularity, it's still an algae. It's an algae when it was unicellular, and it's still an algae when it's multicellular, even though it has differentiated tissues.
Well, you're calling it multicellular. Is it actually a colony, or is it actually something that has maybe a group of people can get together and one decides they're going to raise the food, another one's going to be the policeman, somebody else is going to mow the grass. You can have a community of people cooperating together, but they're still each individual people. They may have the ability to do all the different jobs of the community because they've specialized in one. Like the plumber doesn't know how to do electric. He can do plumbing, but he's still a human being. Are these algae ever becoming what anybody would consider a single organism, or is it just a colony that is species diversification where some specialize in one feature or another? Algae.
1 minute, gentlemen. We've already given 3 extra minutes to this back and forth because you guys were enjoying it so much. So 1 minute left.
Yeah, I mean, we've observed both. So we observed going from unicellular to colonial, and then from colonial to colonial with the exact same cell number and type, to colonial with differentiated cell types, and to colonial with fully different cell types inside the organism in a different location than all the rest of the somatic cells. So we have 6 different steps. So your God wants us to think that things evolved.
No, you've proven my point. You've said a colony every time. All you have is a colony of cells. Sometimes they specialize. One becomes the plumber, one becomes the electrician, but they're still individuals. So it's a colony, not an organism. There's a vast difference.
No, because the individual cells cannot survive on their own. They're dependent on each other.
That's our time, gentlemen, for the 20-minute discussion. You guys were at it so much and enjoyed it so much, we gave you an extra 3 minutes going there. So we have now is our closing statement time for this debate. So each of you has 3 minutes for closing statement, and then we'll have an 8-minute Q&A after that. Is that okay with you guys? You have time for 3-minute closings and an 8-minute Q&A?
Sounds good. Go for it.
Okay, then. Let's see. Taylor started. So, Taylor, your closing statement first.
Okay. So, I believe that I have demonstrated that the process of science, or that the scientific field of evolution is indeed a scientific process by both defining evolution and defining a scientific method. Through the scientific method, we have observed that life changes throughout the generations, micro changes, which my opponent agrees with. And then we've noticed that the fossil record also has similar changes. Since we cannot observe what's between these fossil records, we came up with a hypothesis that these animals changed in a similar manner to what we observe in the lab and in the wild today, only over a much longer period of time. Chemistry confirms the different ages of these rock layers that are millions of years old, even billions. The sorting of these rock layers proves that it was not done by a flood, because the smallest organisms are at the bottom, and throughout each layer is all kinds of biomes. So it's not a shallow water layer, then a beach layer, then an inland layer. There are beaches and oceans and forests in every layer. So our hypothesis was that these creatures changed over time through breeding processes. We've also confirmed this through genomics because of unique inherited mutations that the likelihood that those have arisen twice independently is 1 in 113 something billion. And this holds true for ancestry within populations and without. So the model was that they're related by evolution. The prediction was that we will find transitional forms, and based on the knowledge of where the already known fossils are, what date ranges, we can predict what date ranges the transitional forms will be in. These transitional forms were found based on the model of evolution. This confirms the model of evolution via the scientific method. We have so far come up with lots of different additions to the theory of evolution, such as genetics, which again reconfirms our hypotheses. The only alternative that I can compare this to directly would be creationism, which does not use the scientific method. It assumes the Bible, and then it assumes all information must be consistent with the Bible. And this process repeats until all information is consistent with the Bible. And whenever you come across a piece of information, you only ask yourself, does it agree with the Bible? If yes, keep. If no, deny its plausibility. And that's not scientific.
10 seconds.
I suppose that's where I'll end.
All right. Well, Mr. Hovind, you have 3 minutes for your closing statement, sir.
Well, first, Taylor, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate your coming on here. It's obvious.
Yes, thank you as well.
Yeah, it's obvious you sincerely believe what you're saying. There's no question. I believe that you believe that. I think you're sincerely wrong, as in people in North Korea are sincerely wrong. Communism doesn't work, period. And we've demonstrated that through history in the last 150 years many times. But if you disagree, you get shot. So they have a method of keeping people in line over there. You mentioned the fossil record several times in the last hour. I would like to point out there is no such thing as a fossil record. There are lots of fossils. I have hundreds of them in my museum at Dinosaur Adventureland in Lenox, Alabama. Come on down, we'll show you some. The fact that fossils form at all is good evidence for a flood. You can put my screen back up here, fellas, with the cell. Can you get mine back up?
It's up when you talk.
What's that? Oh, it's up while I'm talking. Okay. There is no such thing as a fossil record. Over the last 150 years, people have tried to, claim that there's some series of events that we can find. The fossils in the order predicted by the evolution theory only found a very few spots in the world, and that's just simple mathematics. It should be, if there are 12 different ones or 14 different ones, of course, occasionally you find them in that order, but the vast majority of the time they're not found in the order predicted. I think you've been lied to if you've been told they've been found in that order when they have not. The complexity of a single cell, one cell in your body, and the average human probably has about 100 trillion cells. Each cell is more complicated than a space shuttle, the most complex machine ever built by man, as far as I know. So here you have 100 trillion of these in one little 180-pound body. Each of these is independent, but they interact with each other. They have a phenomenal information storage capacity in the DNA. How anybody can believe this could happen by chance boggles my mind. Where did reproduction come in? If you go from a single-celled creature that reproduces just by dividing in half, how do you change from this non-sexual reproduction to sexual reproduction? And with sexual reproduction, the obvious question for all of the different kinds of animals that use this, all 8,000 animals on Earth, and nearly all of them use sexual reproduction. How do you get two, male and female, at the same time, in the same place, and capable of reproducing? It is an incredibly complex system of reproducing, no matter how they do it, whether it's the fish that swim by and just sprinkle the sperm over the eggs, or there's many different kinds. Either way, you're getting the sperm to the egg to allow it to reproduce, and then having a place for it to grow, like the uterus or whatever, or the shell in an egg. That is beyond mind-boggling comprehension. I think it's beyond comprehension to think how this could happen by chance. I'm stunned that the universities are allowing students to go through and believe it all happened by chance when it's so obvious there had to be a designer And as far as scientific method, we'll cover that next time. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you, gentlemen, for the lively debate. That's been really nice go back and forth for that 20 minutes, and the closing statements where you elucidated your ideas very well. It seems we're going to have an 8-minute question and answer session. And for that, Standing for Truth is going to ask the questions. You already have some on a list, I believe. So over to you, Standing for Truth.
Awesome. Well, thank you there, Neff. Thank you, gentlemen, for a lively discussion, as Neff said. We got a lot of young Earth creationists in the chat, so that's good. A lot of questions are directed at Snake. Therefore, if Dr. Hovind wants to respond or give or say something to the question as well, I'm all for that. First question is to Taylor from Jeremy. He asks, now that genetics has proven ERVs, so endogenous retroviruses, to be functional, pseudogenes to be functional, and the chromosomal 2 fusion to actually be a functional DNA element in a human gene, how can you still use phylogenetics as your very best evidence? Go ahead.
I don't know if I don't think that's the best evidence. Phylogenetics is the result of the evidence, not the evidence itself. And is he using functional as in coding, or just it has some kind of function? I don't see how that proves anything. I'm not sure what the question is asking, really.
Let me see here. He elaborates. Since those examples, pseudogenes, ERVs, chromosomal 2 fusion, are often used as some of the better evidence for evolution, but now that they've been overturned, what else do you have left?
Well, I never used them to argue anything, so I don't really have much to say about it. I never relied on them. I think they do have a function, and that doesn't change comparative genomics, which is looking at unique genes that are only present within certain lineages. Sometimes we find that these genes aren't as unique, but that just means that we found out it wasn't one of those genes.
Okay, unless Dr. Hovind has something to say, I can go on to the next question.
No, I do. I'm just curious. You are correct. The pseudogenes that they thought were useless genes have all been found to have a function. But if you put a 7-year-old under the hood of your car and say, take out anything this car does not need, he would probably take out a bunch of stuff because he doesn't understand the purpose of it. I think the fact that the pseudogenes and IRVs have all been discovered a use for them is an example of the fact that scientists did not know the usefulness of some of these parts. Life is incredibly complex. The human cell, or any animal or plant cell, is mind-boggling in its complexity. And I think someone with a lack of cell biology knowledge would say, oh, what, the cell doesn't need that, take that out. Oh, we don't need that. We don't know what that does, take it out. It's an example of ignorance on our part, not an example of ignorance on the creator's part. The cell is mind-boggling in its complexity. It had to have, there are no pseudogenes. There might be stuff that is available as a replication. I carry a spare tire in my car. Why? Well, one of the other tires might go flat. That's why. There may be things in the gene code that if part of the gene is damaged from radiation from the sun during the solar sunspot cycle or something, the body can quickly recover and rebuild it and fix it. So that, and why would a body develop something beyond what it's using? Why would it, if it happened by evolution, why would you get a spare tire?
Changing environment.
To me, it's just silly to believe that this all happened by chance. Just absolutely silly.
Well, it's not chance.
Awesome.
It's not chance at all.
Okay, well, thanks for your responses, gentlemen. Next question is to Snake as well. This is from Landon Freeman. How do you explain the sudden appearance of biological features in the fossil record, followed by rapid diversification? And then use an example, as was with the case of insects and their wings. And he also says he has a source for that, and he also mentions the Cambrian explosion. Go ahead.
The fact that they date millions of years apart. Can you explain why the chemistry is wrong from the dating? Like since they're millions of years apart, there's going to be some gaps. It's like taking a picture every couple million of years. So we don't have a picture of what's in between the gaps. So you're going to see some certain features develop suddenly, but it's not that sudden because they always have precursors unless you're talking about the single-celled microorganisms that we found at the bottom.
Okay, unless Dr. Hovind has something to respond to with that, I can move on to the next question.
No, very quickly, I think the sudden appearance, first of all, you're still assuming that the fossil record exists and means something. I would disagree with that. I think that all the fossils we find in the ground indicate rapid burial like Noah's flood would do and represent a sorting based upon a variety of things, intelligence, mobility, body density. Birds are found on top, clams are found at the bottom. That's got nothing to do with evolution. Clams are heavier than birds. Bird feathers are light, their bones are hollow. And birds can fly around until they run out of gas, and of course they're going to be buried on top. Got nothing to do with evolution. You guys want to interpret all the fossils to fit your theory. I can interpret all the fossils to fit the creation and the flood model just fine. When they find the earliest, even if the geologic column was true, the earliest fossils found in amber, for example, insects are identical to today. Where have the changes been? The mosquitoes already had wings. The bees already had wings. They're found in amber from supposedly hundreds of millions of years ago. Where's the evidence of a wing slowly developing on a mosquito? Where's the fossil of that? Because the amber shows them fully developed, capable of flying just like today. I think it's ridiculous to believe anything other than rapid creation, fully symbiotic relationships by the millions, and a flood that destroyed it all, burying them, forming the fossils. No fossils are forming today. How many animals died today? Millions. How many fossilized? None. It's a special process. It has to be buried rapidly like Noah's flood would do. So Peter, 2 Peter in the Bible says the scoffers are ignorant of that creation and that flood, willingly ignorant. And that's the case what we got here.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. Nev, how much more time do we have with questions, brother?
3 minutes.
Okay. So this one as well is for Snake. Now that Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins has demonstrated that the human to chimpanzee genetic identity is not actually 98 to 99% similar, and that it's actually only roughly 88% similar, does that not take away from the evidence claiming that humans and apes are closely related? Go ahead.
Not really, because most of those differences are a 1 to 2 difference in nucleotides. So that's 1 or 2 differences of nucleotides, which isn't even necessarily a difference in amino acid, because the same codon or different codons can code for the same amino acid. So you can have a 2% nucleotide difference and have absolutely 0 protein difference whatsoever. And that's the case with primates and humans.
Okay, unless Dr. Hovind has something he wants to say, I've got...
Yeah, I think he's mistaken. I think the differences are even greater than that. But even if there's only 1% difference, that's a lot. You can take sentences that have just 1% of the letters different from each other and have totally different meanings, just like adding the word not to a sentence now makes it a negative, not a positive. Sometimes with sentences, you can have differences just with the inflection. And we have things in our gene code more than just the coding. There's also the way the way it's emphasized, would be a better way to put it, recessive and dominant. I could use the sentence, I never said he stole the money. 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 By just emphasizing different words in that sentence, that has totally different meaning. Same sentence, identical, different emphasis. I think we have that in the gene code. And I think we should look at the genes and the cells and just marvel like, wow, what a smart God we serve. Thank you, God, for making me. I'm incredibly complex. I don't have a problem bowing the knee. I didn't lose my brain by becoming a creationist. I think it opened up a whole new world. I think guys like Taylor have limited themselves. You have to find a natural explanation. It's like finding an arrowhead and say, okay, how did this happen by chance? You cannot use man as your answer. Well, you've already shut off the only logical answer for the arrowhead, even though it's just natural rock, and there are processes like exfoliation and friction and things that can do those features, especially on flint. But it had to have a designer. There's no other answer. Arrowhead have designers, and this creation has a designer, and I know him personally. And Taylor, I'd like you to get to meet him. Enjoy being a Christian. when we get you converted. All right.
I'd love you to show him to me somehow. But 1 to 2% difference is not really going to make much of a difference, especially when you're talking about a single nucleotide, because phenylalanine, the amino acid, can be encoded for by UUU or UUC, and there are amino acids which have up to 4 different codons that can code for. So if you take a UUU and you change one of those into a C, that's a 1% difference, but it encodes for the exact same amino acid. Protein is going to be the same.
Okay, well, I do have a question here for Dr. Hovind. It looks like it's more of a statement. I think I can try and word it into a question. Actually, I'll go with this one. Question for Dr. Hovind. At what point does the definition change for a kind? And the statement was, poodles give birth to poodles, yet poodles descended from wolves. Does that still mean that dogs produce dogs? Go ahead, Dr. Hovind.
Well, I think every 3-year-old on the planet would say a dog and a poodle and a wolf are the same kind of animal. If you put a poodle, a wolf, and a pine tree, they would quickly say these are the same kind, these are not the same kind. How the evolutionists can think the pine tree and the poodle are the same, have the same ancestor, I don't know. They're welcome to believe that, but that's not science. So I think that in the wild, there would be no poodles in the world at all if there weren't for human protection of them. They would all, this was a selected trait. Why somebody would select a dog to look so dumb, I don't know, but they did, and well, we got them. And so that's an example of artificial selection. Certainly that works. Doesn't create anything. Natural selection is not a creative process. It's a selection process. Evolutionists do not get that. But all it can do is...
There's also mutation.
Mutations are always harmful, fatal, or neutral.
Oh, no, no.
Show me the best mutation you know of that put new information in that was able to find the same stuff and that took over a population. Can you show me any of those?
Yeah. We observe compensatory mutations fixing proteins all the time.
Well, fixing an existing protein is different. I'm talking about new information.
That is new information.
If it fixes an existing protein, you're fixing something that was broken.
No, one mutation broke it and a different mutation fixed it.
But it didn't add any new information. It brought it back to where it used to be.
So we have 26 letters in the alphabet. We can recombine them to make new information in any combination we want, but there's only 26 bases.
Correct.
Right, so if we recombine it into something, a new recombination we've never seen before, that is new information.
So could you recombine these 26 letters and create Chinese words?
That would be like transforming DNA to something else. If we have 4 base codons for DNA, those can combine into anything.
The CATG, they can be combined into anything. Do you really believe that?
Well, they have almost infinite combinations.
Okay.
So,
all right, our time is up. We need to do this again. If you're university, I don't know what university you go to, maybe you're trying to keep that hidden here, but I'll be glad to come have a debate publicly in front of them. I'll pay all expenses for me to get there, stay, and debate all your professors at the same time if I get half the time. Put out that challenge for me, please, okay?
Awesome.
Sure, I'm at CU Boulder.
Okay, I want to thank Dr. Hovind for coming on. I want to thank Taylor/Snake was right for coming on, and I want to thank Nephilim Free for co-moderating this debate for us. Thank you so much, guys, and everybody have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.